Hello friends, as we proceed with the program of discussing the English essay, we today come to Steele, who was an 18th century essayist, and he worked and wrote in the early 18th century, and he was of the same company, the same tradition that Addison established with him. And then the things went on, and they moved towards the rise of prose in the 18th century. And one of the manifestations of the writing in prose was the English novel. So these things are combined, and we have today with us, Dr. Professor Payal Nagpal, who will be talking about Richard Steele, the associate, the companion, the co-worker in the field of essay called Addison. And I think Steele and Addison can't be separated. I would in fact put this question to Professor Payal Nagpal also. And the kind of prose that these people wrote in the 18th century was not the prose that we read or write today. But it's a kind of childhood of English prose, in the 18th century, when people would not bother much about the grammar, and they would be very witty. And some of the sentences would not be English sentences to begin with, but later on they became English sentences. So all these things are very fascinating for us, and since it's a new idea, the English essay, it's not very clearly established in the academic circles, and things are picking up now again. Initially, of course, the English essay was very popular, but then something happened in between. So that way we come back to the essay, and I now request Professor Payal Nagpal to take up the cause of the English essay. In her hands, I'm sure that the English essay is safe, in the company that we have. And we would like to understand the nature of the English essay, which is not there perhaps in many other languages, in the form in which it is there in the 18th century. So over to you.
Thank you, Professor Prakash, and I think you've really kind of set the tone here with with two very important questions I think that you have raised. One is the relationship between Steele and Addison, and the other is, in a sense, the beginnings of the English essay. So I think our general understanding of the essay stems from Addison and the Spectator more than it does from Steele and the Tatler. And whereas actually, to understand, really speaking, the beginnings of the English essay, there are precursors to the Tatler also. But since we're discussing Richard Steele and the Tatler today, so we actually see the way in which the Spectator shapes up. One really has to go back to the Tatler, has to go back to Steele actually to understand the beginnings of the English essay. And, in fact, in lots of ways, I think in general perception, a much ignored area for that reason. So, briefly, if we look at Steele, he's a Protestant, son of an attorney. He lost his parents quite early and was brought up by his uncle and aunt, and he is the one who's credited with bringing out the Tatler in 1709. So it is before the Spectator in that sense. And so it used to come 3 times in a week on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays. And the primary author in that sense was Isaac Bickerstaff. And the Tatler ran till about 1711. So imagine 3 times in a week and to run for almost 2 years. So there are roughly about 271 essays, of which 188 have been written by Steele. And of course, a close associate was Joseph Addison, and they met at the Charter House, were together at Oxford, though Steele never really completed his degree and went on to join the army. But when he finally left that too, that's when he begins the Tatler. Now, an important aspect about Steele is that he was also the official gazetteer and wrote the London Gazette. So that was brought out by the government. So when we look at Steele as a gazetteer, and we also try and understand the nature of the Tatler, and we look at the essay and the way in which it is shaping, it's very interesting to mark several transitions, and of course it would be impossible to do so within a span of an hour, but a very important transition is that from news to the formation of the essay as we understand it. So when we talk about the English essay and the issues that it takes up and the topics that it takes up, so it's important to also mark several transitions, really speaking, within the Tatler to look at how the tone completely changes by the time we come to the Spectator. So, so this was, and Spectator was a daily, and it ran later, after the Tatler, so till about 1712. Now, this is the time of, before we actually analyze, the Tatler, this is the time of the coffee house culture. This is the time of conversation and discussion. So I think these are some very important takeaways when we discuss the English essay. What is it that, where is it coming from? What is it addressing? And how the coffee house culture, conversation, discussion, and another aspect that's attributed is what is called formulation of character. So, newspapers, periodicals, and there are several precursors to this too. But before we head there, here I would request Professor Prakash to share his views on, I think, something that probably also comes to India in that sense much later, much later. And this whole tradition of the coffee house culture and its association with society and the way in which it is rooted there. And the origins of the English essay, to be really speaking, placed over there.
Yes, yes. I think the role of the coffee house in the development of the essay, and the essay necessitating on the reverse, and encouraging the coffee house to come up. These two have that kind of interrelationship, and people sit there, they gossip, they discuss, and they don't bother about what they are saying in the serious sense of the term, because they are gossiping. And coffee house culture, and does that enter the essay? This is the question you are raising, and it's a very interesting thing that English essay actually has its soul in the conversation.
Yes.
So the person in the essay, the writer, talks to the audience, and as you also pointed out that the sense of character appears, and there are certain characters which will emerge in the essay. Those characters will at some place of time, at some point of time, replace the author also, and
Yes.
then they start talking themselves. So this is really very important. The one thing that you pointed out, it didn't occur to me as clearly, is that he was a gazetteer, and he was writing for the Gazette, and that means that he had the temperament of being exact.
Yes.
Mostly essays, are supposed to also give some rein to the flights, some kind of inspiration to just move around spontaneously. But when you write for a gazette, and then you have to give information, so that shows that essay was also serving the role of informing the people about policies, about developments in economy, in politics, in culture, all those things. So Steele, for that matter, would be bringing in the idea of exactness, precision, and the short sentence. So all these things they occur to me as you told me that he wrote for the Gazette.
Yes, absolutely, and you're absolutely right when you say that with Steele we see precision, we see a certain kind of exactness, and the way in which the English essay is actually used to convey information. That's very, very interesting. In fact, he divides it into different parts, and we'll come to that as well. But which is why the understanding of the English essay and to locate its provenance more in the Spectator would be a mistake. To actually understand the essay, I think the Tatler is very, very important. And the Tatler is not in isolation. There are precursors to the Tatler. For example, there was the Athenian Gazette, there was Defoe's Review. They were precursors, really speaking, to the Tatler. And Swift, Addison, Steele were almost contemporaries. So, so in this sense, and when we come to who is Isaac Bickerstaff, so there's a story to this as well, and it's important to understand when we talk about 18th century wit and satire. I think the formation of the character of Isaac Bickerstaff is located very precisely there. So, Swift had published a pamphlet which was called A Project for the Advancement of Religion and the Reformation of Manners. And this had anticipated a lot of the arguments that were used, Tatler and Spectator. And so there was, an author of astrological almanacs, and his name was John Partridge, who Swift considered to be a quack of kinds. He was making a lot of predictions and so on. Here is a glimpse of the Tatler. So, Partridge wrote what was called the Merlinus Liberatus, and Swift, published what he called predictions for the year 1708. And he predicts that on this particular day and month, Partridge is going to die. And he says, if this doesn't happen, then you can, charge me in whichever way you want. So, and the person's name, great actions, events of next year, particularly related as they will come to pass. And he says this is written to prevent the people of England from being further imposed on by vulgar almanac makers. So, and these were astrological almanacs. So, Isaac Bickerstaff, and, who professed to be this astrologer, and, he said that he was willing to be hooted at as a, Isaac Bickerstaff says that he was willing to be hooted at as a cheat if his prophecies were not exactly fulfilled. And so his prediction that, he would, that Partridge would die on 29th March, and so another pamphlet is published the next day.
Did Partridge oblige?
So that's the very interesting part. So the counter to that is already thought of, by Swift. So, and when Partridge in his almanac, he protested that he was still living. Partridge says that, this is wrong and Swift is wrong, and that he's still alive. So, Swift then writes what he calls a vindication of Isaac Bickerstaff, and says that he could prove that Partridge was not alive, because he says no one living could have written such rubbish. So, he says, and this, I think, here is the genesis of Isaac Bickerstaff. And here is where we see 18th century wit and, the battle of it all at its best. So, which is why when Steele starts the Tatler, he starts with Isaac Bickerstaff, who's already been rendered famous in a sense by Swift, and this whole idea. So, he himself sums up the controversy by saying that if a man's art is gone, the man is gone, though his body still appears. So, we look at, the wit that is at work here, and the genesis, in a sense, of Isaac Bickerstaff becomes extremely important. So, here again, we have already located the character, the formation, the genesis, the birth of Isaac Bickerstaff in a kind of controversy that is generated, by Swift, who uses this character to actually, really speaking, respond to what Partridge was doing at that time. And so, of course, wit and satire at its best, and how very cleverly Swift justifies his prediction, that is Isaac Bickerstaff's prediction of Partridge's death. So, one of the editors of the Tatler writes that according to the first number published on 12th April 1709, the aim was to instruct the public what to think after their reading, and there was to be something for the entertainment of the fair sex. The numbers were published 3 times a week on the post days at the price of 1 penny. Each paper consisted of a single folio sheet, and the first 4 were distributed gratuitously. So we have the whole idea of, instructing the public what to think, what to read. And in fact, one must go ahead and say, not just to instruct the public about what they should think or read, but what they should watch. Because there are so many references to plays in the Tatler that it's like almost like a kind of archive of the plays that were being performed. So, it's like they're carrying these mini reviews of the plays that were being performed back in the day. So, this, was very interesting, and the subject of each article was to be indicated by the coffee house or any other place from which it was supposed to come. So, which meant that if we look at it, there's a complete, almost seamless integration here. We have the coffee house culture, we have the society, we have a middle class that is establishing itself gradually, we have current events, and these range from culture to political events, and everything is within the one binding factor is, something like the Tatler. So, again, here, Professor Prakash.
I can really see, the cultural atmosphere that is producing the English essay at that point of time. And you named some of the important figures in English literature. Some of them are pillars of English writing at that time. Swift, for instance, and who can in fact match Swift in wit and a violent kind of play of words and gossip. So these things combine, and that's what the English essay is. That it becomes a kind of playground on which different wits participate, and in a duel, and well, somebody is dead, and then when it is proved that physically one is not dead, then he would justify by saying that, well, if such a person lives, then that is not living, but actually is death. So this kind of repartee, this kind of exchange of views, sharp exchanges. At the same time, at the background also there is humor. So that is what the English essay is. English essay is unpredictable. One doesn't know what you are going to read later, and this kind of unpredictability has something to do with sitting at the coffee house, sipping coffee, and suddenly a flash occurs in your mind, and that flash you share with the audience. And in the English essay, then this kind of writing that comes, that also is in flashes, and there seems to be no direct logical, rational connection between sentences, but then it really relates to the time in which wit is produced. So the idea of wit is once again something that is fascinating. That wit is also shaping, in the cultural atmosphere of the time. That people are not exactly serious. At the same time, they choose their enemies and they attack them through it, and then they can withdraw and they can justify what they said, even if that was wrong in the sense of objective fact. So these are the important things, and friends, one should bear in mind that English essay then is the product of a very fertile ground of culture at that point of time, and you can perhaps make one or two points before we...
Yes. So, taking on exactly from what you said about the flashes, so if we look at the Tatler and the way in which it is actually divided into different sections is very interesting. So, for example, Steele says that all accounts of gallantry, pleasure and entertainment shall be under the article of White's Chocolate House. So, that's a coffee house. White's Chocolate House. So, everything that is to do with gallantry, pleasure, entertainment, all that comes under White's Chocolate House. Poetry comes under Will's Coffee House. Learning comes under the Grecian. Foreign and domestic news comes under St. James's Coffee House. And of course, then he says, there are things that he says which are from, he calls it from his own apartment. So, he says that what else I shall on any other subject offer shall be dated from my own apartment. And here the writer is somebody who has access to a lot of information, and this information ranges, as I said, from the political, the current to culture. So, these are domains that are very clearly covered in all, in several issues in a sense of the Tatler. So, to make this one last point to quote Steele here in the preface to the Tatler, where he says that the general purpose of the whole has been to recommend truth, innocence, honor and virtue as the chief ornaments of life. But I considered that severity of manners was absolutely necessary to him who would censure others, and for that reason, and that only, chose to talk in a mask. He's giving the reason of why he's not writing as Steele and writing as Isaac Bickerstaff. He says, I shall not carry my humility so far as to call myself a vicious man, but at the same time must confess my life is at best but pardonable. So, here what we see is, in a sense, and to this date, the shaping of the middle class with respect to certain aspects like truth, innocence, honor, virtue. So, we see that there is a class that's emerging, and there is a recognition of certain aspects of, in a sense, performance in life that are to be closely associated, in a sense, with this rising middle class.
So, friends, Professor Payal Nagpal has made 2 or 3 very important points. One is regarding culture, the other is regarding the atmosphere that at that time is of wit. There is a kind of rationality behind wit, but then rationality and wit are sometimes also standing apart from each other. And finally, that the essay, English essay, will promote a kind of middle class which is there, which belongs only to the city. I think in the following discussion, the second part of the discussion, I would request her to comment about the rise of the middle class in this fashion, that it has no connection at all, for instance, with the village, with the small town. It is entirely urban. It's entirely the educational field, and there it is that the English essay prospers. So, with this remark, I just have a pause in the discussion, and when we reopen, then these questions can be addressed further by Professor Payal Nagpal. Thank you.